In June of last year, the United States and Iran were sitting across a negotiating table, working through a nuclear framework. Washington had set a 2-week window for Iran to demonstrate meaningful progress. Diplomats were cautiously optimistic. Analysts were writing about the possibility of a deal. 3 days into that 2-week window, American B-2 bombers were en route to Iran's nuclear sites. That precedent is the single most important fact about the diplomatic talks currently underway between Washington and Tehran. Because right now, in the spring of 2026, the same structure has reappeared with precise symmetry. Negotiations in Geneva, a 2-week window for Iran to produce a draft proposal, White House statements describing cautious progress, and assembling in the waters surrounding Iran, quietly, methodically, carrier by carrier, the largest concentration of American naval firepower deployed to a single region since the opening of Operation Iraqi Freedom. The question that every government in the Middle East, every oil futures trader, and every military planner in Tehran is trying to answer right now is the same question. Is this a negotiating posture, or is this the last thing Iran sees before the strikes begin? The honest answer is that both things are true simultaneously, and that may be exactly the point. Donald Trump's approach to Iran has never fit neatly into the categories that foreign policy analysts prefer. It is not pure diplomacy, the kind that operates on the assumption that sustained engagement will eventually produce compromise. It is not pure military pressure, the kind that signals an inevitable strike and dares the other side to prepare. It is both, run simultaneously, with each track designed to make the other more credible. The diplomatic track is real. Envoys Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner met with Iranian counterparts in Geneva and returned with a framework for continued talks. The White House described the sessions as producing a little bit of progress, while acknowledging the two sides remain very far apart on some issues. Iran has been given 2 weeks to return with a detailed proposal. That is not the language of a government that has already decided to go to war. Or at least it is not only that language. The military track is equally real and considerably more visible. What the Trump administration is assembling around Iran right now is not a show of force in the diplomatic sense, the kind of routine carrier deployment that regional commanders use to signal American commitment without implying imminent action. This is an armada. The USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group is already positioned in the northern Arabian Sea. The USS Gerald R. Ford, the largest warship ever built, displacing more than 100,000 tons, is transiting through the Strait of Gibraltar toward the region. 2 destroyers are holding position in the Mediterranean, oriented toward Israel. A guided missile destroyer is in the Red Sea. 3 combat ships are in the Persian Gulf. 2 more destroyers are in the Strait of Hormuz itself. 1 destroyer is in the Gulf of Oman. When the Ford arrives and joins the Lincoln, the United States will have 2 carrier strike groups, each one capable of independent sustained air operations, within strike range of Iranian territory simultaneously. Military analysts do not assemble that kind of force to make a point about American resolve in the abstract. They assemble it because someone has done the math on what it takes to execute a sustained campaign against a country with Iran's air defense network, ballistic missile arsenal, and geographic depth. And the math came back requiring 2 carriers. Iran's president has stated publicly and repeatedly that the regime does not seek nuclear weapons, that the supreme leader's religious decree, or fatwa, prohibits their development, and that Iran is prepared to accept whatever verification mechanisms the international community requires. The statement is consistent with Iran's official position across multiple administrations and multiple rounds of negotiations. It is also, from Washington's perspective, insufficient. The sticking points are 2, and they are not minor technical disagreements capable of being resolved through clever drafting. They are fundamental conflicts between what each side considers non-negotiable. The first is Iran's enriched uranium stockpile. The United States wants it gone, physically removed from Iranian territory, not diluted to lower enrichment levels, not stored under IAEA monitoring, but surrendered. Iran's position is that it will dilute the stockpile, but will not abandon it, and will not relinquish its domestic enrichment capability. The distinction matters enormously. Enrichment capability is the industrial infrastructure that allows a country to produce weapons-grade material relatively quickly if it decides to do so. A country that retains enrichment infrastructure is a country that can reconstitute a weapons program on a timeline measured in months, not years. The second is Iran's ballistic missile program. The United States and Israel want it curtailed or dismantled. Iran's answer is effectively no, and here is why. In last year's 12-day conflict with Israel, Israeli aircraft systematically destroyed Iran's surface-to-air missile batteries, including the Russian-built S-300 systems that represented the backbone of Iran's air defense network. Iran's defensive shield has been largely stripped away. Its ballistic missiles are not just a deterrent or a regional power projection tool. They are, at this point, Iran's primary means of self-defense. Asking Iran to surrender its missile program in the aftermath of that air campaign is, from Tehran's perspective, asking it to stand naked in front of a firing squad and promise not to run. Neither of these positions has moved meaningfully in 2 weeks of negotiations, which is why the Armada's continued assembly is not incidental to the talks. It is the argument. This week, Trump made public something that had previously existed only in classified planning documents and military analyst speculation. In a statement directed nominally at British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who has been negotiating the return of the Chagos Islands, home to the joint US-UK military base at Diego Garcia, to Mauritius, Trump said the quiet part at full volume. Should Iran decide not to make a deal, it may be necessary for the United States to use Diego Garcia and the airfield located in Fairford in order to eradicate a potential attack by a highly unstable and dangerous regime. Diego Garcia is a coral atoll in the middle of the Indian Ocean that most people could not locate on a map. What it hosts is one of the most strategically significant air bases on Earth, a runway capable of handling B-2 Spirit stealth bombers and the support infrastructure to stage and sustain them for extended operations. It is from Diego Garcia that B-52s flew missions against Iraq in 1991 and 2003. It is from Diego Garcia that the B-2s that struck Iran's nuclear facilities last June departed. RAF Fairford in the United Kingdom serves the same function for operations that require Atlantic staging. What Trump was saying, stripped of diplomatic language, is that the United States has identified the specific air bases from which it would launch strikes on Iran, has confirmed those bases are in the operational plan, and is prepared to use them. This is not a president keeping his options ambiguous. This is a president describing the infrastructure of a decision that has already been substantially made, contingent only on whether Iran produces an acceptable proposal within the 2-week window. Iran is not waiting passively to see how the diplomacy resolves. Satellite imagery released this week shows significant fortification activity at Iran's 2 primary nuclear facilities, the enrichment site at Natanz and the conversion facility at Isfahan. Tunnels are being buried under additional layers of sand and concrete. Roofs have been reconstructed over missile launching sites. These are not the actions of a government that believes the diplomatic track will succeed on its own. They are the actions of a government preparing its most valued assets to survive another round of the strikes that damaged them last year. Iran is also demonstrating its asymmetric options. This week, the Iranian Navy conducted military exercises in the Strait of Hormuz, specifically practicing the closure of the strait to commercial shipping. The Strait of Hormuz is the choke point through which approximately 20% of the world's traded oil passes. A successful closure, even a temporary one, would send oil prices to levels that would trigger a global economic response far beyond the immediate military confrontation. Iran cannot match the United States carrier for carrier, fighter for fighter, or guided munition for guided munition. But it can make a war economically catastrophic for everyone watching, and the Hormuz drills are a public demonstration that it is rehearsing exactly that option. A Russian warship has also docked at the Iranian port of Bandar Abbas, and joint naval exercises were conducted in the Sea of Oman. The strategic message is deliberate. Iran is not entirely without friends, and those friends have their own reasons to complicate an American military operation in the region. Whether Russia's presence represents genuine military backing or opportunistic signaling is a question that American planners cannot afford to answer incorrectly. With the Armada in position and the 2-week diplomatic clock running, the Trump administration holds 3 distinct options, and the choice between them will be made in all likelihood before the end of the month. The first option is coercive diplomacy, using the assembled firepower as leverage to extract concessions that would not otherwise be available. This is the scenario where the Armada achieves its purpose without firing a shot, where Iran's government looks at 2 carrier strike groups within striking range, calculates the cost of continued defiance, and produces a proposal in Geneva that gives Washington enough to declare a win. The historical record for this kind of pressure, producing genuine Iranian concessions on its nuclear program, is not encouraging, but it is not zero, and it is the outcome that every American ally in the region is quietly hoping for. The second option is a limited strike, a targeted campaign against specific nuclear facilities or ballistic missile infrastructure, designed to degrade Iran's capabilities without attempting to destroy the regime itself. This is the Operation Midnight Hammer model, scaled up. It creates facts on the ground, punishes defiance, and stops short of the kind of sustained campaign that would require ground forces, allied coordination, and a plan for what comes after. The risk is that Iran's response, Hormuz closure, proxy attacks on US bases, ballistic missile salvos against Israel and regional partners, makes limited a description that survives only until the first Iranian counterstrike. The third option is the one that Iran's supreme leader has explicitly warned about, a campaign designed not just to damage Iran's military infrastructure, but to decapitate the regime itself. This is the Venezuela model applied to a country with 10 times the population, a professional military that survived last year's Israeli strikes largely intact below the air defense layer, and a network of proxy forces distributed across 5 countries that would activate simultaneously. American military planners have gamed this scenario. The 2-carrier force suggests they believe it is executable. Whether it is wise is a different question, and one that the Armada's presence does not answer. What history suggests, and what the June precedent makes impossible to dismiss, is that the gap between a 2-week diplomatic window and an active strike package is smaller than it appears from the outside. Last year, that gap was 3 days. The B-2s were already being loaded when the diplomats were still talking. The USS Gerald R. Ford is transiting the Strait of Gibraltar. The USS Abraham Lincoln is already on station. Iran is pouring concrete over its centrifuges and practicing closing the world's most important oil choke point. And somewhere in Geneva, diplomats are drafting a proposal that has 2 weeks to make all of the above irrelevant. 2 weeks. The same window as last time. Last time, it took 3 days.